After my cousin humiliated my autistic son at the reunion, her own daughter refused to go home with her. My cousin Diane was laughing so hard at my son that her drink sloshed over the rim of her cup. The backyard was packed with relatives, and the smell of burgers filled the air. My 9-year-old son Micah was rocking back and forth near the picnic table with his hands over his ears. Diane pointed at him and made exaggerated rocking motions with her whole body. Her friends clustered around her and started mimicking Micah too. I dropped the plate I was holding, and it cracked against the patio stones. Micah heard the sound and started humming louder to block everything out. My wife rushed over from the drinks table and knocked into my uncle. Her eyes were already filling with tears as she reached for Micah. Diane kept laughing and slapped her knee like this was the funniest thing she had ever seen. I could feel my hands shaking as I stepped toward her. The music from the Bluetooth speaker suddenly felt deafening against all the noise. Diane's own daughter Lily was standing frozen near the bounce house with her mouth hanging open. She was 12 years old, and she was watching her mother mock a child with autism. My aunt tried to pull Diane away, but Diane shrugged her off and stumbled sideways. More relatives were turning to look, and conversations died across the yard. Micah started hitting his palms against his thighs, which meant he was getting overwhelmed. My wife wrapped her arms around him and tried to guide him toward the house. Diane shouted something about special treatment, and everyone heard it. My grandmother dropped her cane, and it clattered loudly against the concrete. Two of my uncles stood up from their lawn chairs at the same time. Lily took 3 steps backward and bumped into the bounce house wall. The vinyl made a loud thwacking sound as she pressed against it. Kids inside the bounce house stopped jumping and poked their heads out to see what was happening. My mother grabbed my arm, but I pulled away from her grip. I assumed Diane was just drunk and being stupid because she always drank too much at family events. I figured she would apologize once she sobered up and realized what she had done. My wife was nodding at me from the back door, like she agreed we should just leave quietly. I reached for Micah's hand, and he grabbed my fingers tight. Diane stumbled toward us, and her heels sank into the grass. She was still giggling and wiping her eyes like she had been crying from laughter. But then, Lily ran across the yard and planted herself directly between Diane and us. Her small fists were clenched at her sides, and her whole body was trembling. She turned to face her mother, and her face was red with anger. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She held it up so everyone nearby could see the screen. There were text messages displayed, and I could see my cousin's name at the top. The messages showed Diane planning this whole thing with her friends days before the reunion. She had written about how funny it would be to mock the weird kid in front of everyone. Lily's voice cracked as she spoke up. She said her mom practiced this. Diane's face went completely white, and she grabbed for the phone. Lily stepped back and held it higher so more relatives could see. My grandmother shuffled closer and squinted at the screen through her glasses. Diane lunged forward, and her ankle twisted in the soft grass. She went down hard on one knee, and her cup flew out of her hand. The liquid splashed across the grass and onto Lily's shoes. Lily didn't even flinch as she stood there holding the evidence for everyone to witness. Diane reached up from the ground, and her fingers clawed at the air. My uncle stepped between them and blocked Diane from getting any closer. Diane scrambled to her feet, and grass stains covered her white pants. She grabbed Lily's wrist and tried to twist the phone away. Lily screamed, and the sound cut through the entire yard. 3 of my cousins rushed over and pulled Diane backward. Her fingers left red marks on Lily's arm as she was dragged away. My grandmother was shaking her head, and tears were running down her wrinkled cheeks. Diane started yelling that Lily was an ungrateful brat. Lily threw her phone on the ground, and it bounced twice before stopping. She ran to Micah and dropped to her knees in front of him. She told him she was sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper, but I heard every word. Micah stopped rocking and looked at her face for the first time. Diane screamed for Lily to get in the car right now. Lily wrapped her arms around Micah and shook her head without turning around. Diane had planned to publicly humiliate an autistic child for entertainment, and her own daughter had saved the proof. My aunt stepped forward and told Diane to leave without Lily. Diane's jaw dropped, and she looked around for anyone who would take her side. Every single person in that backyard was staring at her with disgust. My grandmother pointed toward the gate, and her hand was steady despite her age. Diane grabbed her purse from the picnic table and knocked over 3 cups in the process. She stomped toward the side gate, and her broken heel made her limp awkwardly. Lily was still holding on to Micah, and her shoulders were shaking with sobs. My wife knelt down and wrapped her arms around both children. Diane slammed the gate so hard, the wooden slats rattled. Her car engine roared to life, and tires screeched as she pulled away. Lily looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. I reached down and squeezed her shoulder. My aunt was already on the phone arranging for Lily to stay with her instead.